All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a civilization that somehow survived constant invasions, total religious revolutions, and the rise and fall of countless empires over literally 3 millennia. We are tracing the complete history of ancient Egypt, from the very first unification of the Nile Valley, all the way to its dramatic, almost cinematic end with Cleopatra.
To even begin to understand these people, we've got to start with the wild geographical contrast that birthed them. Picture this. On one hand, you have the life-giving Nile River. It flooded like clockwork every single year, dumping this incredibly rich, fertile soil and creating a narrow little strip of life. It gave them water, agriculture, and basically a massive natural highway for communication. But step just past that riverbank, you're in a totally different world. The harsh, endless desert. It acted as an expansive, isolating border. But you know what? That unique, highly protected environment was exactly what allowed tiny Egyptian villages to safely grow into towns and eventually into massive political powerhouses.
Just think about the sheer scale of time we're talking about here. It's a story of human endurance that is honestly kind of hard to wrap our heads around. I mean, for over 3,000 years, a single civilization maintained its core, distinct identity. It successfully outlasted changing empires, shifting religious tides, and literally entire historical eras.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer, tracking the incredible historical roller coaster of highs and lows. We're going to cover the foundation of the pharaohs, the age of builders, the new kingdom empire, conquerors and queens, and finally, an eternal legacy.
Part 1. Foundation of the Pharaohs, the unification of 2 lands. So right around 3100 BC, a ruler named Narmer comes along and unifies the separately developing southern and northern regions. And boom, the role of the pharaoh is born. But here's the thing you have to remember. They weren't just kings managing agriculture and collecting taxes. They were seen as the divine preservers of this incredibly delicate cosmic balance called Ma'at. Ma'at represented truth, balance, justice, and order between the human and divine worlds. It's like the ultimate glue holding their entire universe together. The whole civilization was built on this absolute conviction that the pharaoh's main job was to preserve that harmony.
Of course, it wasn't always smooth sailing. We can actually build a sort of mental map of their history. Think of it as periods of immense, unified, golden age stability, like the early dynastic period, the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. But those are separated by these chaotic, messy eras of fragmentation. Between the Golden Ages, the central government would inevitably break down, leading to divided regional powers, what historians call intermediate periods, before someone would eventually sweep in and reunify the whole thing all over again.
Moving into Part 2, the Age of Builders, constructing eternity in stone.
As we enter the Old Kingdom around 2686 BC, the Egyptian state develops this just breathtaking ability to mobilize massive amounts of labor and resources. You can clearly see the architectural evolution here. Initially, they just used traditional low burial mounds. But then, an architect named Imhotep designed something totally revolutionary for Pharaoh Djoser at Saqqara, a massive step pyramid. This evolution eventually culminates during the 4th dynasty with Khufu's monumental Great Pyramid at Giza. I mean, it literally stood as the largest structure on Earth for thousands of years. And these pyramids weren't just big tombs. They required coordinating thousands of laborers and craftsmen to quarry and drag enormous stones. It was the ultimate flex, the ultimate demonstration of state power.
Now, preserving that cosmic order, Ma'at, meant ensuring a safe crossing into eternity, which required a wildly meticulous mummification ritual. They carefully removed and stored the internal organs. Then, the body was completely dried out using a natural salt called natron, before being wrapped in endless careful layers of linen. Finally, they placed the body in a tomb packed with vital provisions. We're talking food, clothing, jewelry, furniture, the whole shebang. The tomb essentially functioned as a physical bridge between life and eternity.
All right, Part 3, the New Kingdom Empire, projecting power across the ancient world.
After a rough period of decline and foreign rule, a leader named Ahmose I manages to drive out the invaders, reunites the lands, and kicks off Egypt's wealthiest, most powerful imperial era. They started projecting power way beyond the Nile Valley, and this age gave us some truly incredible leaders. You have Hatshepsut, one of the most successful female rulers ever, who presented herself using traditional male kingship imagery, built jaw-dropping monuments, and launched vast trade expeditions to Punt. Then, right after her, Thutmose III transforms Egypt into a true military empire, aggressively campaigning and expanding deep into the Levant.
But then we hit a massive, totally unprecedented shock to the system: Akhenaten.
This guy completely upends centuries of deep-rooted tradition, challenges the old gods, and elevates a single sun disk, the Aten, above absolutely everything else. Originally known as Amenhotep IV, he changes his name, moves the royal court out to a brand new capital in the middle of nowhere, and strips the powerful old priesthood of all their authority. It was an astonishing disruption to Egyptian society. Though, as it turns out, his radical revolution ultimately died right along with him.
So order is eventually restored by the young Tutankhamun. He didn't actually rule for very long, dying as just a teenager. But his premature death inadvertently left us something amazing, a perfectly preserved time capsule of staggering royal wealth. Because his tomb famously remained hidden until its discovery in 1922, the modern world finally got to see a royal burial in all its untouched, glittering glory. Weapons, chariots, intricate furniture, elaborate jewelry, and of course, that absolutely iconic golden burial mask.
Not long after King Tut, we see the absolute peak of imperial power under Ramesses the Great. He ruled for over 6 decades, which is wild for the ancient world. He carved those colossal, unforgettable statues into the rock at Abu Simbel and even forged one of the world's earliest surviving international peace treaties after clashing with the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh. But even a zenith like this couldn't last forever. The empire eventually contracted, collapsing under severe economic pressures, fresh foreign invasions, and a rapidly weakening central authority.
Which brings us to part 4, Conquerors and Queens, the final fight for independence. As the new kingdom fell apart, Egypt basically became a massive prize for neighboring powers. They endured rule by Libyans, Nubian kings sweeping in from the south, the rapidly expanding Assyrian Empire, and eventually the Persians. But the map was about to shift again. In 332 BC, the Egyptians actually welcomed Alexander the Great as a liberator. Alexander crushes the Persians, gets recognized as pharaoh, and founds Alexandria, a city that would become a legendary Mediterranean hub of learning. After he died, his general Ptolemy set up a Greek dynasty. And what's fascinating is that even though they were Macedonian Greek rulers, they went all in on building traditional temples and completely adopting ancient Egyptian religious customs. Let's look a little closer at the very last ruler of this dynasty, Cleopatra. She wasn't just some legendary, dramatic queen of myth. She was a brilliant, cutthroat strategist desperately trying to save Egypt using Roman politics. Operating in a highly volatile, dangerous environment, she forms a vital alliance with Julius Caesar, even having a son with him, just to secure her throne. After Caesar's assassination throws the Roman world into total civil war, she allies with Mark Antony. Together, they controlled enormous territories and resources in a really desperate bid to maintain Egypt's independence.
But it wasn't enough. In 30 BC, following a crushing naval defeat at Actium by Octavian, who would soon become Emperor Augustus, it was over. Cleopatra and Antony's forces couldn't hold out. With her death by suicide, the 3,000-year run of an independent Egyptian state finally came to a close. Rome annexed the territory, and ancient Egypt was now just another region of the Roman Empire.
And finally, part 5, an eternal legacy. A civilization built to outlast its creators.
The political state might have collapsed under Roman rule, but their culture, it absolutely refused to vanish. Their language continued, their massive temples functioned for centuries longer, and their religious traditions survived way past the fall of the last pharaoh. And they didn't just build big tombs, they profoundly shaped human knowledge. We're talking about a civilization that developed complex writing systems, advanced mathematics, and pioneering medical knowledge that literally laid the groundwork for the modern world. They mapped the stars with sophisticated astronomical observations and created architectural traditions that influenced other cultures for millennia.
Look, no pharaoh could ultimately control history forever, right? Nobody can stop that endless cycle of collapse. But they did successfully anchor their memory in stone. The contrast here is just incredibly powerful. The politics? Totally fleeting. Dynasties rose and fell, foreign empires invaded, and powerful rulers died. But the permanent things, the pyramids, the temples, the deeply cut tombs, and the stone hieroglyphs, they survived their creators by thousands of years.
And honestly, this is their true victory. The kings are long gone. The ancient gods aren't worshipped the way they once were, and the temples are completely silent. Yet, through their art, their writing, and their astonishing architecture, the civilization they created still speaks to us today as loud and clear as it ever was.
So it leaves us with this final thought. Did the pharaohs ultimately achieve the immortality they spent 3,000 years building toward? When you look at the colossal monuments still standing proudly beside the Nile today, you really have to wonder if they didn't achieve exactly what they set out to do. They built for eternity, hoping their names and their world would never be forgotten. And thousands of years later, as we sit here unpacking their story, it feels like ancient Egypt didn't just survive history, they conquered it.